Everybody, let's start this thing up. Thank you guys for joining us today. It's going to be a real good one. So get ready to get a lot of New York City rental information thrown your way, guys. And the goal of this, as always, is to get nuggets of wisdom from these guys that you could then pass on confidently to your clients, right? Make us a better expert. That's what it's about. Today, we welcome Gary Malin, COO of Corcoran. Thank you for joining. We also got David Schlamm, founder and CEO of City Connections. Between the two of these guys, 60 years. 60 years of rental experience coming right at you. And you guys know me, I don't like to waste time. We're going to go right into this. Gary, I'm starting with you. I want to get this out of the way before we go to the meaty stuff. State of the market, New York City rental market. What is going on with market rental prices and market conditions right now?
On the price front, we're pretty much at all-time highs in both Manhattan and Brooklyn. And what I find interesting about the fact that we're at those all-time highs is that we've had 21 consecutive months of vacancy rates being above 2%. Now, most people think, oh, 2% does not sound like a very significant number. I have 100 units, I got 2 empty, that's pretty good. But historically speaking, in New York City, anything above 2% is more a tenant-friendly market than it is a landlord-friendly market. So I think it's like you look at the inventory side, you look at the price side, I think owners have been very stubborn with respect to what they expect and what they want when it comes to pricing, which is why the vacancy rates are staying high. There's always interest in New York City. There's always tenants out there. But I think if the price is adjusted, not significantly, you would see that vacancy rate go down below 2%. So it'll be interesting because we're heading into April. And then once May comes, that's like when the race really begins for the next 4 months. So I think it's a strong market, but I think there are opportunities there because I think the pricing is a little frothy depending on what you're looking at.
Okay. And before I go to David, I want a few more questions with you about concessions and OPs, Gary.
Very little in the marketplace. I think the only time you're really seeing, any sort of concession, whether it's a new development where you can't really, compare that to a re-rental, right? You're dealing with potentially hundreds of apartments that need to be rented, and every day an apartment doesn't get rented. You have, lost rent. So you'll see them in newer buildings. And the way you will see them in current buildings is if someone's trying to overprice the market, for whatever their reasons are, and they would prefer to have, I'm just going to make something up, a $6,000 a month face rent versus what the actual market is. So to offer an enticement to whether it's free rent and or payment of a commission to get what they want for their books and records, but at the same time, make it attractive to tenants.
Okay. And in terms of inventory, heading into the spring and summer season, any kind of outlook on that?
I mean, look, right now, as I said, we're close to 2.3% vacancy rate. So I don't really see that's going to be a massive problem, but I think depending on what you're looking for and where you're looking, I always tell people that all markets are not created equal, right? There's certain markets, let's just use the West Village as an example. It's a small footprint, comparatively speaking, to the Upper East Side. So depending on what you want, where you want to be, how picky you are, you might find certain segments of the market far more competitive than others.
Okay. Thank you. David, we're going to shift to you. I want to get your perspective on what you're seeing. I know that you guys are slightly different, but you still have tons of data funneling up to you. David, can you tell me what you're seeing out there with the market rental prices and market conditions?
Gotcha. Well, first of all, I want to say hi to you guys. And Gary, that's a sharp-looking shirt you got on. So thank you for wearing that today. It's very nice. I agree with my associate here on all the points. The prices, yes. I look at the market a little bit smaller than what Gary does. He has a better bird's eye view because I look at the portfolios and exclusives that myself and my brokers have, which is mostly walk-ups and elevators, some condos and stuff like that. But what I'm seeing is I totally agree. We went above. 2021 was that crazy year where there were like 20 applications and we got the highest prices. And we are going above that right now. And they're paying fees. And the other thing is that it really, really depends, just like Gary said, the location. It seems south of 23rd Street is always good. I mean, it's just, the Chelsea and the Village and Soho and Gramercy and things like that. Yeah.
In terms of concessions and OPs, I think you mentioned something about that. What is your thoughts there?
Same thing, people give OPs because there's a reason. There's very few. It is in newer luxury buildings. It is in buildings where the landlords, for many reasons, want to get the higher price. And it's also sometimes in secondary locations, such as maybe financial district. I'm seeing a couple of buildings with OPs on it. Because it's a little tougher to rent there than, let's say, West Village or Charles Street or Perry Street or something like that. But very few, very few.
And just remind me again, when is, I know there's a seasonality to the rental market. When is that peak period for the rental market, in your opinion?
It used to be August was the best month for so many years. I find that it stops the second week of August, but the best months, in my opinion, the busiest as a broker is May and June, and maybe a little bit of July. And what's interesting is it's really picked up the last couple of weeks, not months, but the last couple of weeks, we're starting to see a little start of the season.
Okay. Excellent. All right, good. I needed to get that state of the market out there so that you guys have a general idea about what these guys are seeing in terms of market conditions. Gary, we're going to shift back to you. I got a whole batch of questions. We're going to shift the format now. All right. So David, I'm going to have you on the sideline here for about 10, 15 minutes. We're going to talk to Gary, and then David will shift back and we'll talk to you for 10, 15 minutes. But Gary, let me ask you, Gary, lack of building and development that's going on right now, that it's feeding this environment that we're in. Is it early in its cycle, mature in its cycle? I mean, how long do you expect this to be in place?
I mean, look, we're in a bad political environment when it comes to the residential real estate market. There's so many arguments about giving developers incentives to build property. And this lack of a 421A is undoubtedly causing a very significant issue when it comes to creation of new buildings. And I think that it's an unfortunate set of circumstances because a lot of the people that are trying to legislate our market don't understand the business that they're trying to legislate. And I think that it really hurts the marketplace. A lack of supply artificially, right, keeps rental prices higher. If you just look at what happened during COVID, and I know that's an extreme circumstance, but let's just use that as an example. Look at all the vacancies that occurred and so what happened to the marketplace. The rents went down 25, 30%. Concessions were rampant. Owners needed to do anything and everything they could to stabilize their buildings. So if you're not adding new supply to the marketplace, if you're effectively constraining supply because of all the warehouse departments, whether it's 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, I don't really care because everyone has a different number. If you're not putting property out there for people to actually secure, then all you're doing is the exact opposite of what all these politicians are looking to do, which is quote unquote make New York more affordable. They're making it less affordable. The 2019 rent laws were a disaster, right? So many unintended consequences. And even when you explain to these legislators, like, look, there's a lot of things we could all do to work together to actually solve a lot of problems and a lot of issues, their answers are simply no. There's no negotiating here. We're not having a conversation. So I am concerned, just like with the political headwinds that we face in this industry at the moment. So it's hard to say, is this, the first inning of a baseball game, fourth inning or eighth inning? Because I think until rationality applies, whether it's, changing zoning laws like in the business districts to allow more residential development, whether you can redefine what a bedroom is, legalizing basement apartments. There's so many like low-hanging fruit ideas that would help this market, and they just seem to be completely against all of them. So I don't feel like we're close to a solution because I don't think the people that are trying to advocate for their side of the world understand what the ramifications are for their regular client. And this doesn't just impact people think like stabilized tenants. This impacts free market clients. Like more inventory makes it more competitive. When it's more competitive, prices come down.
Right. David, I just actually want to ask you really quickly. I know we're going to go back to Gary. You mentioned to me previously that those 2019 rent regulations, that was a game changer in terms of what happened. Do you agree with that?
It was horrible for landlords. It was horrible for tenants, and it was horrible for brokers. It was really not, as Gary said, it wasn't well thought out, maybe well intentioned, somewhat, but it didn't pan out. There's no reason why we should have 10, 20, or 30,000 empty rent stabilized apartments when there's a shortage of housing.
Right. Gary, Any idea how many new construction rentals are set to come on in this year and next year in Manhattan, or you don't have that
I
information?
don't, off the top of my head, I don't know, but it's nothing significant. You know,
Right.
there's just very little building. There's very little permits pulled. There's very little construction, unfortunately, because unless you had your foundations in and you were sort of exempted or grandfathered, whatever the right word is, for, you know, the old 421A, and there's some conversations about we needed to extend those people so they could actually build. So it's not a lot, let's just put it that way. And just to circle back to something that David, you were just talking about, I read a story recently, and the numbers are probably off to some degree, but someone had bought a rent stabilized portfolio of 1,000+ units, you know, probably pre-19 rent law changes, give or take, for $300 million. They just recently sold it for $180 million.
Wow.
So there's a $120 million loss right there. So if you think about where tax revenues come from, right, like almost 50% of the tax revenues from the city come from real estate. And if all of a sudden values start to plummet in the multifamily arena, plus the office arena, you know, then the city can't even afford to deliver the services that it looks to deliver. So these rent law changes have been nothing but problematic on a multitude of fronts.
Wow. Interesting when you talk about it like that. 421A, is that ever coming back?
My gut tells me it's going to have to come back sooner or later. Like, the problem that people don't understand, it's like, if you're a developer, there's a lot of risks involved, right? In buying the land, designing the building, building the building, construction costs, labor costs, insurance costs, real estate taxes, you name it. So there's risk involved. There's no such thing as like a home run guaranteed each and every time. So if the numbers don't pan out, and a developer says the risk versus reward simply isn't enough for me to take this jump, then no building's happening. And that's what you're seeing now. And I just think that, unfortunately, you're going to have to push people to the brinks before people get rational and realize, like, we need to do what we need to do to incentivize building. Look what's going on in Florida. When you speak to developers that are building there versus here, they're more welcoming, right? The mayor comes, he cuts a ribbon with you. They want you there. They're pro-business, they're pro-construction. Whereas here, it feels very much anti-real estate sentiment. So I think that sooner or later, things have to change. I'm typically an optimist, so I kind of believe sooner or later, rationality comes around and we make good decisions. But right now, it feels like you're still in the middle of the storm.
Yeah, let's hope you're right. Can you talk briefly about changes to the voucher policies to make it easier to secure housing?
I mean, listen, everyone, you know, I sit on the board of governors of REBNY and the board of directors, and I work with REBNY, and we try to get in front of city officials, and we're trying to do everything that we possibly can to make these people understand, like, the rules are too complicated. The concept of having an owner have to get an inspection that could take 30, 60, 90 days, that, like, the city at times is not paying people on a timely basis. Like, you're putting impediments in the way for people who want, need, and deserve housing. I think everyone wants to help everyone find housing. It's a fundamental right. You want to put people in good situations, but good luck trying to find a caseworker in many instances on a timely basis, not because they're trying to avoid you. There's just not enough caseworkers in relation to the number of people that are out there looking to secure housing. So if the client themselves is unaware of what his or her voucher amount is, does it vary by zip code? You know, so many different things, and there's so much red tape, and it's so convoluted. You're not actually serving the intended purpose, which is frustrating. And a perfect example, if you look at the 2019 rent laws, whatever number of quote unquote warehouse departments are, if you went to all of these owners and said to them, look, we're going to let you renovate your apartments and bring them up to the current standards, right? You know, because obviously to bring them up to the proper standards can cost a lot of money. Some of these apartments haven't been touched in years and years, and you can bring them up to voucher limits. Not necessarily fair market value. Sometimes the voucher limits are very close to fair market, and maybe in certain markets even more expensive. But let's say whatever it is, it's substantially more than their current thing is. You would have pretty much every one of those owners within a matter of days, if not weeks, hire construction crews, get their apartments up and ready, and they would be available for people with vouchers. But instead of doing that, they just want to stick to, nope, if you want to renovate your apartments, you're constricted by the 15 grand and $90 a month, and we want the rent from 1984 to be applied in 2024. So their answer is, no, I'm not renovating my apartments. I can't afford to. It's not economically feasible. So I just think if calmer heads prevailed and we all wanted to work together to solve this problem, we could. It just doesn't feel like the other side of the aisle is willing to make any rational adjustments to help serve the purpose that they say they're trying to serve.
Wow. I told you guys. I told you guys what was coming here today. David, do you agree that the landlord mindset is the landlord thinking is I'm not going to do it unless they give me these types of stimulus or changes to policies?
Absolutely. And I feel bad, a lot of my friends who own portfolios, their parents, their fathers bought the buildings in the 70s and 80s, and, there's no big mortgage, they're not leveraged. But I feel so bad for the people who, let's say me, you and Gary chip in. We bought a rent stabilized building in Brooklyn Heights, and we put all our money into it. And all of a sudden, one day, the whole end game changes. It's really bad, and it hurt a lot of people. And just like the example Gary gave, I read that article too in The Real Deal, I think it was. We're going to see more of that. We're going to see people who can't go negative that long, and there's a lot. So yeah, I agree.
The one thing I want to jump in is I think it's really critical for everyone in this industry to reach out to all of their local council members and really voice their concern and voice, the frustration that people feel. I sat in a meeting recently with a couple of developers who have a lot of these apartments, and they're the ones advocating for the change that I just talked about. And their biggest answer or question or problem is the same thing: lack of inventory. So it's like, why not free up inventory if you're truly looking to get people out of shelters, put them in permanent homes where they want to be, where they're part of the fabric of the community, where they could really enjoy life. Instead, like, we're fighting about things that don't make sense. And one of these developers said to me, like, when he spoke to one of the policy, the city council members, is like, well, you make enough money as it is, so why do you need to make more? Like, that's not a productive conversation to spur development. And that's why it feels very anti-real estate, anti-business. And it will change. It's just a matter of, is it a year, 5 years, 10 years? I wish I had an answer, but I don't.
Yeah, we're stuck in a limbo until then. All right. Enlightening. All right. I want to go to the next question. Could you, Gary, this is for you. Could you explain good cause eviction, please?
Effectively, it's like universal rent control, right? They're trying to dictate that when an owner wants to increase a tenant's rent, that they're going to be constricted as to how much. It's tied to, like, I think, a percentage or CPI, however it exactly works. And effectively speaking, a lot of owners feel like I'm not in the same boat as my friend over here who owns this building for 30 or 40 years, and he or she has no leverage, no debt. Versus me, who just recently bought this building at the height of the market. Interest rates are different, economics are different. Like, I need to be able to make enough money to sort of run my property effectively for the tenant's behalf. So it's this political maneuvering to sort of once again constrain pricing, right, and keep pricing so people can stay in their homes. And I don't think we can argue about the broader goal, right? I don't think that's the issue here. It's how do you achieve the broader goal? And if all the other things that we just discussed about rezoning, basement apartments, definition of a bedroom, political stimulus, unlocking all these units, they would get the results that they're looking for to keep pricing more manageable. And I just think this is one additional sort of like step too far. And listen, I think a lot of owners, that I've spoken to, I guess there's certain components of good cause that might work, but most times under the current iteration, it won't work. So I think ultimately a lot of these things have to be and will be probably discussed in a broader real estate package that encompasses so many different things, where if you looked at it in its totality, maybe it becomes more palatable if there's some exclusions, if there's some carve-outs, if there's ways to make different examples based upon different types of property. I just think, like, this is why it's a very broad issue, because it's multiple things having the same impact, causing constriction of inventory and rising prices. So I think that's going to be part of a larger discussion. But from what I understand, the current iteration is not necessarily something that even a lot of politicians are in favor of at the moment. They might be in favor of the idea, but not the actual specifics of the current policy.
Yeah, I mean, it's go ahead, David.
I want to add something to this good cause eviction. One other thing that disturbs me about it, if I were a landlord, when you're a rent stabilized tenant, you have the option to renew. The landlord does not. Under the good cause eviction, the tenant will have the right to renew, even if it's decontrolled. let's pretend Gary and I are having parties till 4 a.m. and we're messing up the whole building. Everyone's moving out. Well, it'd be hard to get us out if this law passed, because unless we get caught doing really bad things, they have to renew. And that's just not fair, in my opinion. If someone's causing a lot of problems in the building, they shouldn't be allowed to renew. But c'est la vie. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's just crazy, the interplay of policies with the dynamics that are powering the rental market right now, and like how those policies could change and how the rental market could change as a result. Tightly correlated. All right, Gary, I got one more question for you, and then I'm going to shift to David's batch of questions.
Sure.
Gary, how is the rental broker bill? This is a big one. How has the rental broker bill impacted the markets in practice?
Well, at the moment, it hasn't impacted anything whatsoever because there is no rental broker bill that's actually been passed. What they're trying to do is sort of—
It has been passed. Just to clear that up, it is passed.
No, it is not.
It is not passed.
There's no restrictions on how you can charge a rental fee. It's constantly being brought up, but it's not gotten to a vote at this point. So it's still a free market. Tenants can still pay, landlords can still pay, so on and so forth. What they're trying to accomplish is similar to what you're reading in the papers today about the sales world, about decoupling the commission. So what they're effectively trying to say is he or she who hires you should pay you. So if the owner hires you, then you can't get money from the tenant. And if the tenant hires you, then you can't get money from the owner. The simple fact of the matter is that we already have a very effective, efficient, clear, and transparent real estate market when it comes to rentals. Everything everybody knows is currently negotiable. And the simple fact of the matter is, if you went online right now and did a search, half the apartments that exist for rent right now are probably, no fee. So they're trying once again to artificially change the dynamics of the real estate market without understanding the ramifications. And the simple fact is there will be unintended consequences. So I represented David previously, and he loves me, and he loves my company, he loves my services, but he was never paying anything for it, right? And now all of a sudden he still wants to use me, but now he has to pay me a month's rent for each and every apartment I rent on his behalf. What do you think he's going to do with his rents? He's going to increase them, right? If he has additional costs that he did not have before, whatever owner he or she will increase their costs. The simple fact is, if they don't have an infrastructure, and then they have to hire an infrastructure to handle the showings, the paperwork, the applications, the lease signings, the transfer of funds, what are they going to do? They're going to increase their costs. The simple fact is, it's a free market. Stop over-regulating what people do. They have this perception that every single person in the real estate industry makes millions and millions and millions of dollars, and that this isn't going to hurt anyone. We all know the people are not making millions and millions of dollars, especially if you're new to the industry, especially if you're working in the rental market. You're certainly not in that category, and I think they should just let the free market decide. But this isn't, once again, a real estate issue, right? This is a political issue, and these people want to pander to those that keep them in office, versus actually coming to the table with the brokerage community, sitting down and discussing what are effective ways that we all can represent people effectively, passionately, and professionally. Because in the end, what's upsetting is everyone wants to blame the real estate broker for why things are so expensive in New York City. We are the least expensive component of this business, okay? Union labor, real estate taxes, insurance, construction costs, land values, you name it. All of these things are forcing owners to increase price. So the broker, who is like literally the last part of this transaction, is the one that gets the biggest brunt of the sort of disdain. And it's just upsetting because it's simply not true. And when you have conversations with these people, they're like, I don't really care what you have to say. I'm like, but you should care what I have to say, because you're 24 years old and I've been in the industry for 26 years. So I actually think I know more about the business than you do. It doesn't mean that my position has to be exactly right, but yours is so wrong. You have to come to the middle and find a reasonable ground where we can all survive. They're just like, no. So it's hard when you're talking to people that don't understand what they're trying to do. And if you specifically ask them how the 2019 rent laws helped, they don't have an answer for that. And when you give them facts that it hurt, they're like, well, so what? We don't care.
Yeah. Well, maybe there's other
Crazy.
agendas in play. Yeah. Maybe there's
Political.
other agendas in play,
Listen,
and it's
it's called vote getting. Not
yeah.
effective legislation. That's what they're trying to do, is keep their position in politics versus actually serving the people that they're elected to serve.
Yeah. It's frustrating. Gary, how probable is it that this rental commission bill passes?
50-50, maybe even a little bit higher now, 60-40. It's not just a city issue anymore from what I've been told. It's also percolating in the state level. But, I think that we're trying from a revenue perspective, from a brokerage perspective, from an industry-wide perspective, of trying to educate those that are trying to legislate about the unintended consequences. So hopefully we can come up with something that's more fair and reasonable. My gut tells me at some point over the next X amount of months, it's likely a vote will come on this issue. Last year, we were able to bat it back down. That's why I implore anyone that's on this, podcast, and anyone in your companies and anyone the only way things work is if you speak up. And if you live in the city and you have a council member, you need to reach out to your council member. You need to be vocal. You need to explain to them, stop interfering with free markets that work efficiently and effectively to drive your personal/political agenda, because it's not going to help. It's going to hurt.
Yeah. Gary, I got to say, like, I'm kind of glad that you're on that position of fighting on behalf of everything you're talking about here that impacts everyone that's on this call, that does business in this great city. I hope the right thing prevails. Very, very important topic. All right. David, you still there?
Sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being so patient.
He was taking a nap, but he's okay.
I love you guys. David, I want to shift the conversation away from all the heavy stuff. We went through a lot of stuff, state of the market, a lot of policies, regulations, other stuff with rentals. I want to shift to the personal side of the business, the relationship side of the business. Can you tell me something about what you've learned and what you know about how this rental game works? How can agents increase their chances of winning it?
Sure. I want to give an example what I went through, because I worked when I started. It was just me. That was it. Just working out of a basement apartment. And I'm going to tell you about a phone call I made in, I think it was 1990. By the way, most of my relationships personally is built on trust, and the people I work with, most of them I've kept for 30, 33 years. And basically, there was one time, this is a good story, I'll make it quick. In 1990, there was a guy who owns a building near Union Square. We still do the rentals on his building. And it was, for those of you who are younger than me, which is 94% of you, there was a recession from 1990 to 1993. And he used to put an ad in the New York Times and it said, no brokers. I called up and the first thing I said is, I am a broker and I'm not looking for a commission. And all of a sudden he would talk to me, because that's the reason he didn't want to deal with brokers. He didn't like to pay. He still doesn't like to pay. But what happened was, I don't even remember if I rented the apartment or not, but it was during a downtime, and he introduced me to other people that he knew and landlords and whatever. And this is a true statement, that one phone call I made that said, no brokers, please, has brought in probably between $13 and $14 million worth of broker's fees since 1990, because he turned me on to other accounts. It is much easier to break into an account and get exclusives during a down market. I will say that. When it's really, really busy and hot, even in the open listing market, the landlords like to go with people who they've done business with before. So trust is very important. Try to service the landlord. I mean, it's a corny old expression. The commissions will follow. The commissions will follow. Do the right thing. Be ethical. And keep going and keep in touch with them. Even though they say no, you never know when a landlord's going to have a bad experience with the broker that they have, and they forget you pretty easy. So just keep in touch and try to be friends with them. That's what I am.
How do you find them? How do you find these landlords? Any ideas there of how to find them?
Back then there was I forgot the company put it out. Gary, you may remember it was a big, thick blue book, and it listed all the addresses and all the telephone numbers that you could find. And I did cold calling back then, but most of my business, personal business, is referral based. I'm not good at many things, but I have a good reputation, and I think that's what's helped me to keep all these relationships over, over 30 years.
So for new rental agents, advice: work ethic, focus on landlords, relationships, and trust. Anything else for new agents?
Yeah, I want to go back to work ethic. It's different now. Back then, we controlled the information. Now it's much easier to see information due to the internet. I think that if you're a new rental agent, first of all, go to a company where you can get great training and don't worry about how much you're going to make the first year. Don't be so short-sighted. Get some good, solid training with a good, reputable company. Work ethic. I actually did this years ago when I hired new people. I actually would go out in a group of 5 people and we would go look at 15 apartments in a day. We'd walk around together like the merry pranksters, and we would look at apartments. I'm just saying that right now, if you're new and you have downtime, yes, try to market yourself with social media and things like that, but get off your rear ends and go see property. There's a big difference between seeing a property online with professional photography than it is actually walking into the building and seeing it. So, and hard work is still just so important. Keep going, be able to take a punch, but keep going.
One thing I would jump in there just about new agents.
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks, Dave. I think it's critical that people understand we're in the hospitality business. We're not in the real estate business. Service, and more service will lead to really good business. The difference between being a salesperson and a service-oriented person: a salesperson, a client thinks only cares about the money they make. A service-oriented person, the client believes they care about them. And I think when you win the client over, all those other things that David said follow. But if you don't have the service mentality, this business becomes very difficult.
I also believe it's very important to learn as much as you can. An expression that's used quite often is to become an expert advisor. It is important. You need to know more than the client. One thing that Revenue does very well is there's a lot of great classes. So, take them, get smart. If you got downtime, get smart and hang out with successful and honest people. That's a good thing too. And if someone's
product
really
knowledge.
negative, what's that?
I was going to say product knowledge as well. I mean, in this market, product knowledge, right? You got to know your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And what Gary said, it is a hospitality service business. You don't call that person back or follow up, not good. And if you don't have good news or anything like that, don't avoid someone. Tell them, what's going on.
Okay. Well, so far this has been great. All right, we covered a lot of areas that I wanted to cover. I wanted to cover a lot of different topics. And, with this registration for this webinar, we asked people to submit questions. We got about 60 questions that we had to go through. I wish I could ask all 60 questions, but I can't. So I got about a batch of questions here that we thought would be complementary, different from what we talked about today so far, to kind of change it up. So I'm going to do a lightning round. Okay, a lightning round. Both of you guys are free to answer this question. And if you both want to answer the same question, that's fine. So I'm just going to start asking and I'm going to let you guys answer. Okay. Okay. Number 1, any updates on standard procedures for rentals?
Well, it's like I discussed, we're waiting to see how the city council and these votes come down with respect to how you represent a client. I think the other stuff is pretty standard, tried and true, and there's not many changes in it. That's the big unknown in the industry right now.
Okay. David, anything or good there?
Nothing. I think the last few years we've gotten some more forms, disclosure forms that we have to get signed, but no big changes. And no big changes.
Okay. Are agents now supposed to charge clients differently for showing rentals due to this NAR settlement case? I know this might be a repeat of what was said, but I got it here, so let's just clarify.
No.
Ooh, in sync. All right, so we got 2 no's, so that's that. How do you report a landlord that might be doing something that they shouldn't be doing? How would one go about reporting that?
I would guess you would report them to fair housing, but more importantly, don't do business with them.
Okay.
Don't
Gary,
don't
any
be
thoughts
part
there?
of
No.
don't be part of the crime. You don't jeopardize your license or your company's license.
I
Okay.
agree completely.
Okay.
You cannot condone that type of behavior. And, we have taken plenty of people out of our system, and we've also over time reported people who have done things that are not right. You don't want to ever, as a real estate agent, I just want to be really clear, do anything to jeopardize your license and your livelihood to protect someone who is clearly doing something that they shouldn't be doing. There's no one client anybody should represent that's more important than your life and your livelihood in this industry.
Excellent. If mortgage rates stay higher for longer, figure the next 1 to 2 years, how does that impact the rental market?
More people will rent. And so then the supply will go down, demand goes up, prices go up.
Okay, Gary?
Look, I think people are capitulating to the fact that mortgage rates are not going back to what they were before. I think if they stay this high, it certainly suppresses people's desire to purchase a home, and more importantly, which is the biggest problem, put their homes on the market, because if they're locked into a lower rate, where am I going to go? But sooner or later, good market, bad market, prices adjust to reflect everything that goes on. So if the world is a higher interest rate world and the prices come down, I always tell people you have to stop focusing on an interest rate. You need to focus on your payment. So I think life comes into play where you can only hold off doing things for so long. But for those people that are financially stretched, by all means, it forces them to stay in the rental market longer than they might want to.
Right. Let me add that I have shown or sent out emails showing a 30-year chart of mortgage rates. We're still very low. And I think, people the last 5 years, let's say, are just used to the low interest rates, and they will get more used to it. And like Gary said, we'll figure in what the monthly payments should be. But it's not that high if you look at a 30-year chart.
Okay, good. Does the broker fee bill that was discussed today, does that apply only to New York City or to New York State as well?
Well, the one that's being discussed now on the rental side is mainly been pushed by New York City, but as I said, it's also being considered by New York State. So at this point, it could be on both sides of the equation, but there's no definitive answer how that's going to play out yet.
Okay. This is an interesting question. Will these higher rents that we kind of talked about as a potential possible outcome here in the next 1 to 2 years, if this continues, will higher rents push those renters to the sales market?
Look,
tricky.
Listen, I always tell people, like, the decision to rent or buy isn't necessarily always simply an economic decision. It's a life decision. And sometimes your life decisions are more important than the financial considerations. So you might have to make some adjustments about what's going on. But if you plan on living somewhere for an extended period of time, even though rental pricing is high, maybe you just feel it's a better way of life because it gives you more flexibility. Or you could say, you know what, I'm paying this much money in rent, I might as well buy something and I get some tax deductibility on it. So I think it's different strokes for different folks. And I think everyone's personal circumstances will dictate the best decision for them, because I don't think it's a one size fit all for anybody for that matter.
Agree.
Love it. What are your thoughts on the open leasing market? How have you seen this business change for real estate agents, if at all?
Fire away, Schlammer. I'll follow up.
All right. You got it. The open listing, well, first of all, at my company, which is much different than Gary's, his company's way bigger, 97% of our businesses were on the listing side, and just our exclusives are ours alone and things like that. I think it's very difficult to just do open listings. I think it's important that you know the open listing market and do some deals and do a combination, but there's less places to market it. And unfortunately, what I've seen through the years on open listings is I'll be nice here and say the listing isn't always accurate. How do you have a 30 floor view overlooking Manhattan in a 4-story brownstone? There's a lot of fake. You need to capitalize and get the phone to ring. Okay. If you have an ours alone or exclusive in today's market, there's really no problem getting the phone to ring. And there's just less places to market it. That's my opinion. What do you say, Dr. Malin?
I think that it's become more complicated because the information is more transparent than it used to be way back in the day. But I also think a lot of owners have built up their own internal infrastructures or their own brokerage companies inside of their organizations to make what used to be an open listing, more difficult for someone to actually transact in. But I still think there's plenty of amazing owners out there that have open listings, that love working with brokers, that you just need to have good relationships with those people. You need to understand good value. And you need to understand, like, if you would ask any real estate agent that advertises a rental listing that a client calls on, I would say less than 10% of the time does the person that called on this listing actually rent that listing. So, you got to understand, it's like, what else do you have? What other, inventory do you have at your disposal? Because there's a lot of stuff that's not exposed to the marketplace. So as a consumer, you're not necessarily seeing a full view of the marketplace. So that's why being knowledgeable, being professional, understanding the industry, seeing property, all of that helps those agents that might be navigating the open rental market, because you should have 6 or 7 or 8 other opportunities for that client that they're not aware of.
I also think a broker showing open listing should protect him or herself with some sort of fee agreement, because it is easy to go back around someone when it's not your exclusive, and landlords in general don't want to get involved in those disputes. So get a fee agreement signed if you're doing open listings.
Okay, very good. Why can't landlords or brokers rent or advertise for roommates?
I mean, listen, I don't know if there's a legal reason behind it. I think you're basically putting yourself in a whole hell of a lot of problems about who this person's going to be, what liability exists. I just don't think brokers should be involved in matchmaking roommates. It's just not a business that I would want to be in. And we all could joke around about the movie many, many, many years ago that most people on this podcast don't know, Single White Female, I think it was called.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like, it's just, why put yourself in that situation? It's like, you know what? If you're a person that's looking to get an apartment, go find your own roommate before you show up with a broker. A broker shouldn't be put in the middle of that. It's too much stress in the day-to-day aspects of your job to begin with. And now all of a sudden, if something bad happens, are you accountable for someone's bad actions? I just think it puts you in a situation you should avoid.
Yeah, that's not part of our business model either. And I'm sure there's plenty of websites where you can meet other roommates and things like that. I don't want to be involved with that either.
Okay, stay away from it. All right, and I got a few questions in this Q&A right here, and I'm going to let you guys go, and I really appreciate your time. But I do see some overlapping questions in here. What is REBNY doing to protect compensation for rental agents? That's one question. But then there's another question that's similar: is what are brokerages REBNY doing to combat the lack of co-broking during the high season?
Well, look, I'll jump in. First of all, REBNY is doing everything humanly possible to fight this broker bill. What people probably don't remember is in 2019, or not 2019, whatever year it was, it could have been 2019, when the original rental broker bill came out, all the political advocacy, all of us going down to City Hall, all of the news that came there, all of the pressure that we put on the council member who is bringing it to bear is the reason why it was batted back. Okay, and they've done everything again last year to fight this bill back. The reason why it didn't get brought to a vote last year was because of all the advocacy and because of all the things that REBNY sends out to all of our agents. They send something where it's so simple and so easy. If you live in a certain district, you hit here, boom, it goes to the proper person. So I assure you that, REBNY is doing everything. What everyone needs to truly, truly understand is that REBNY is just a compilation of all the brokerage firms, right? The brokerage firms collectively are the ones pushing agendas and working with REBNY, and REBNY is the one that enforcing them. So I assure you, because I spent a lot of time on this issue with REBNY, they are going at this left and right. As far as co-broking is concerned, listen, we have universal co-broke agreements. If you have a a revenue member firm, they're supposed to be co-broking with you. They cannot make someone who is a non-revenue member co-broke with you. So, a lot of it is if you're running into somebody in this industry that is part of a revenue member firm and they're not co-broking and they're being difficult, my solution is you ask your manager to pick up the phone and call the manager from the other company and solve it that way. Revenue has the rules, has the guardrails, has everything in place. But if individual agents or firms sort of try to go outside those lines, it's very difficult because basically there are rules, there are regulations. If people want to ignore them, they're going to ignore them. But I think it's always good to pick up the phone and try to have a dialogue. We all have good relationships with people at other firms. And I think this industry, whether it's agent to client, agent to agent, manager to manager, that's how you solve problems. And unfortunately, you're always going to have a few people out there trying to push the edge of the envelope.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that. One second, David. When I was doing business back in 2005 and 6, and in your office, Gary, back then, it was always there then too. So I'm wondering, is this just always there? And that, we got to do our job to mitigate this or again, bump it up to the next level and let them hopefully competently handle that situation. But go ahead.
I mean, look, unfortunately, you're in a situation where individuals choose to do things their way, right? And the question is, does the manager or does the firm know of what their agent is doing? And are they doing anything to curtail that behavior? And that's why I think people don't always know what individual agents are doing on a daily basis, right? Because they're out with a client or they're out talking to a broker to broker. The manager of that office would not know about that individual conversation. But I sort of the concept, you see something, say something. And I think that most times, I've been in this business now for many, many years. We work well together, we solve issues, and we get things done. Because what comes around goes around. And I always tell people, you know what? There's no one deal that anybody does that is so important to ruin your reputation with your client and or with another firm or another agent, because sooner or later, you're going to need that person on the other side of a deal. So don't always try to maximize your compensation. This is about your clients that you're representing, and their goals should be your preeminent goal, and cooperation is really key.
And your reputation is going to be your leverage. Your reputation is going to ultimately be your leverage, because if you have that reputation, you will be able to do easier deals with developers, with other agents, et cetera. It does help.
Yep.
David, any final thoughts here? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to one other thing about the broker bill, which most of you on this call don't know what we're doing about. I'm also on the board of directors, and you probably don't know, but either every week or every other week, me, Gary, and a few other people and revenue attorneys, we talk every week or every other week how to deal with this. So we're really on top of it, as Gary mentioned. And we don't get paid that much for it. We don't get anything. So we're fighting you guys.
Yeah, pro bono. It's pro bono stuff. And listen, thank you both for your service to the industry and helping us. And let me just say thank you guys. Thank you guys. We had about 155, 160 people on here. I hope that you guys got some information that will help you be a better agent and help you service your customers. Yeah.
And we appreciate you bringing us together. Listen, it's important for us to highlight what's going on in the industry. And it's important for agents to realize you can't be passive about what's going on. You need to be active. And you can't just think that somebody else is going to solve the problem. You need to be part of the solution as well. And it doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take a lot of effort. And if you want to protect your income, you want to protect your way of life, your industry, your business, you need to get involved and you need to speak up and you need to make sure your company is involved and your company is speaking up, because collectively we're a very strong voice. Individually, it becomes a lot more difficult.
And what was that government official's desk you said to contact in case they wanted to submit something?
It's all of their city council members. They can look up to see who the city council member is for where they live, and then to reach out to that city council member and voice concern about all these misguided bills and explain to people what it's like to be a real estate agent, how hard the job is, and what valuable service you provide. I think that they're missing it. That's all. Guys,
do that. Do that, please. I know it's a nuisance to do these things. It's going to take you a little time. Find your city council member and go through that process, and it'll help our cause as an industry. Guys, fantastic. Thank you guys so much. That is Gary Malin, COO of Corcoran. That is David Schlamm, founder and CEO of City Connections. I am Noah Rosenblatt, and this has been What's in Store for 24 with the rental markets. Thank you guys. Have a great day. Good luck out there, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers, everyone.
Ciao
Cheers.
for now.